Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going deep into the world of G.I. Gurdjieff,
Oh, yeah.
a spiritual teacher whose ideas have really intrigued and challenged people for over a century, right?
Absolutely.
And we're going to be exploring his core concepts, this framework for self-transformation that some people even call a how-to guide for waking up.
Yeah, it's true. Gurdjieff's teachings can be, honestly, pretty dense and cryptic,
Yeah.
but I think at their heart is this really powerful idea
Yeah.
that most of us, we're living in this sort of sleep state, just going through the motions without truly experiencing life.
Yeah. Okay. I think we've all felt that kind of is this it? Is this all there is kind of feeling? What did Gurdjieff actually mean by this sleep state, and how do we actually wake up?
So he believed that this sleep state that we experience, it comes from this fundamental illusion, this idea that we're separate from each other and the world around us, and even like different parts of ourselves.
So it's like we're fragmented beings, not really a cohesive self.
Exactly. Yeah. And this fragmentation leads to so much like internal conflict and contradiction.
Yeah.
And he uses this really interesting analogy of the man-woman machine, suggesting that we're really just a collection of different eyes, each with their own desires and impulses.
Okay.
Think of it like this. One minute, the I that wants to be healthy is in charge, and the next minute it's the I that can't resist those donuts.
Right.
We're pulled in so many directions that it's hard to know who's really at the wheel.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, especially the donut part. But if we're so fragmented and lost in this sleep state, how do we even begin to see these different eyes at work? How do we become aware of our own internal contradictions?
That's the question, right? Well, Gurdjieff argued that our minds have developed these like really clever defense mechanisms. He called them buffers to kind of shield us from the discomfort of actually seeing our own inconsistencies.
So buffers are like those justifications we tell ourselves to avoid facing, those harder truths.
Exactly, 100%. For example, imagine snapping at a loved one. Instead of acknowledging that part of you that acted impulsively, we might say, well, I was just stressed, or they pushed my buttons, or whatever it is.
Right.
And those buffers might feel comforting in the moment,
Yeah.
but they keep us trapped in this cycle of just reacting mechanically instead of responding consciously.
That's such a good point. I mean, we've all been there making excuses for our behavior instead of really looking at the root cause. So
Yeah.
how do we start breaking through these buffers and waking up from this sleep state, this, going through the motions?
So Gurdjieff proposed that the key to breaking free lies in this one skill we have, and that's developing attention.
Okay.
He considered attention the cornerstone of his entire teaching.
Yeah, you know what? That actually reminds me of those stop exercises that we talked about a while back.
Oh, yeah.
Even trying to focus on something as simple as my breath for a few minutes is actually really hard.
Yeah, it's because our attention is usually getting pulled in a million different directions by all these external stimuli, you know, our phones, social media, the news.
Right.
It's constant, and it drains our energy and prevents us from seeing what's happening within.
So our attention, our ability to focus, it's directly tied to our energy levels.
100%. Yeah, Gurdjieff believed that we have this limited amount of energy, and by identifying with all these external things, we're essentially leaking this energy, leaving very little for like actual self-awareness or inner growth.
Okay, I'm starting to see the connection here. So if we can learn to consciously direct our attention inward, we free up energy that can then be used for self-observation and breaking free from those mechanical patterns, those habits, those things you were talking about. It's like building a mental muscle that we haven't been using, you know what I mean?
Exactly. And one of the ways Gurdjieff suggested we do this is by understanding the concept of the four states of consciousness.
Okay.
So these are sleep, waking sleep, self-consciousness, and objective consciousness. And he believed that most of us are living in a state of waking sleep. We're not asleep in bed, but we're not fully awake to ourselves or our potential.
So even though we're, going about our day, making decisions, interacting with others, we're not really present. We're not really in the moment.
Yeah. Our awareness is clouded. Our actions are driven by these unconscious habits and reactions. Think of it like driving on autopilot.
Okay.
You might get to your destination, but did you really experience the journey? Were you present for the changing scenery, the different sounds, the emotions that came up along the way?
Wow. I mean, when you put it like that, it's like we're missing out on the richness of our own lives.
Exactly. And that's why Gurdjieff's work is so valuable. It offers these tools and techniques to help us shift from that state of waking sleep to a state of true self-consciousness, where we become aware of those automatic thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that have been driving the bus.
So if waking sleep is like driving on autopilot, then self-consciousness is like being fully engaged with the wheel, choosing our direction, and like experiencing the ride more fully.
That's a great way to put it. It's about waking up to the present moment, to ourselves, and to that incredible potential that's within each of us.
Okay, I'm definitely starting to see why this whole idea of waking up was so central to Gurdjieff's teachings. But how do we actually make that shift from waking sleep
Yeah.
to self-consciousness? What are the like practical steps involved?
That's where Gurdjieff's work gets really interesting, right? He offers this whole system for self-observation and transformation.
Okay.
And it all starts with, like we were talking about, recognizing those mechanical eyes.
So it's not enough to just like intellectually understand that we're fragmented. We have to actually see those different eyes in action.
Yeah, 100%. He believed that self-observation is key, like literally the key. He said self-observation is the first step towards liberation from the tyranny of the subconscious.
Okay, that makes sense. But like, how do we actually self-observe? It seems like a bit of a paradox.
Yeah.
How can you observe yourself without the observer being just another one of those fragmented eyes?
That's a great question. Gurdjieff would say that the key is to cultivate this detached, impartial observer within ourselves.
Okay.
It's not about judging or analyzing your thoughts and feelings, but just noticing them without getting, completely swept away by them.
So it's like creating some space between ourselves and our experiences so that we can see them more clearly, more objectively.
Precisely. Imagine you're watching a movie, right? You can get totally caught up in the storyline, identify with the characters, feel all their emotions.
Right.
But you can also choose to step back to kind of observe the film objectively, appreciating the cinematography, the acting, the director's choices, all without losing yourself in the drama.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of detached observation that Gurdjieff encouraged.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get a feel for this, but I gotta say, it sounds really challenging. I mean, our minds are so busy, so full of thoughts and emotions all the time.
Yeah.
How do we even begin to create that space for observation?
So Gurdjieff offered several different techniques, but I think one of the most fundamental is just paying attention to your habitual patterns, like really seeing them. He really encouraged his students to become aware of their mechanical reactions, those automatic responses to situations that just, keep us stuck.
Can you give me like an example of a mechanical reaction, something we might like all relate to?
Totally, yeah. Imagine you're stuck in traffic, right? And someone cuts you off.
Don't even...
The most common mechanical reaction is going to be anger, frustration, maybe even like a few choice words under your breath.
Oh yeah, I think we've all been there, especially here in LA traffic.
Right. But in those moments, Gurdjieff would say, don't be so predictable. Instead of just reacting automatically, take a step back. Yeah. Observe the anger, the frustration, without letting it control you, without letting it take over.
So it's about recognizing those automatic reactions as they're happening and choosing a different response. But how do we do that, like, in the moment when it just feels like those emotions are so strong, so immediate?
That's where the conscious effort comes in. Gurdjieff was really adamant that breaking free from this mechanical way of being requires work, discipline, a willingness to really challenge those deeply ingrained habits.
So it's not like a quick fix, but an ongoing process of self-discovery and transformation.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a journey, not a destination.
Yeah.
And along the way, Gurdjieff believed that one of the most powerful tools that we have is this understanding of energy.
We talked a bit about attention and energy earlier, but can you kind of elaborate on how Gurdjieff actually viewed energy?
Totally. He saw energy as the fundamental currency of life flowing through all things. He believed that we each have this limited supply of energy, and how we direct it determines the quality of our experience, like totally shapes our reality.
So it's like we have this budget for our energy, and we need to be mindful of how we're spending it, making sure that we're not, wasting it on things that don't really matter.
Exactly. When our attention is scattered, constantly pulled outwards by all these distractions, we're just wasting precious energy. It's like leaving all the lights on in your house. You might have plenty of power coming in,
Right.
but you're going to run up a hefty bill.
That's a great analogy. So if we're constantly like leaking energy through distractions, how do we actually plug those leaks and then redirect that energy towards like self-awareness and growth and all these things we're talking about?
Gurdjieff offered a ton of different practices, but I think the core principle is conscious effort. He believed that by engaging in activities that require focused attention, whether it's meditation, physical exercises, or even just like being fully present during a conversation,
Right.
we strengthen our capacity to actually direct our energy where we want it to go.
So it's like building a muscle. The more we exercise our attention, the stronger it becomes.
Exactly. And as we become more skilled at directing our attention, then we can actually begin to work with those mechanical reactions, transforming them into more conscious responses.
Okay, that makes sense. But where does the Enneagram fit into all of this? We briefly touched on it earlier, but I'm still not quite clear on what it is or how it's relevant to Gurdjieff's teachings.
Right. So the Enneagram, as Gurdjieff used it, is basically like a map of consciousness.
Hmm.
Right. It describes these 9 interconnected personality types, each with its own patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving.
So it's like a personality typing system. Like, oh, I'm this type, you're that type kind of thing.
It can be used that way, but Gurdjieff actually saw it as much more than that. He believed that understanding your Enneagram type could really help you see your own mechanical patterns more clearly.
So if we know our type, we can better understand our habitual reactions and then kind of start to break free from those patterns.
Exactly. Each type has its own set of like traps,
Okay.
There's unconscious tendencies that keep us stuck in that waking sleep. But by becoming aware of our type's patterns, we can start to work with them consciously.
That's fascinating. It's like having a personalized guidebook for understanding our own, like, quirks and challenges, you know?
Totally. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Gurdjieff believed that the Enneagram wasn't just about individual personality types,
Okay.
but it actually reflected these universal laws that govern all of creation.
Okay, now we're really getting into the deep dive, like universal laws. Can you elaborate on that a little?
Yeah, so Gurdjieff saw the Enneagram as this symbol of the interconnectedness of all things.
Okay.
He believed that the same patterns that govern our individual psyches are also at play in the cosmos, like literally,
Wow.
in the movement of planets, the cycles of nature, even the evolution of consciousness itself.
So it's like we're each a microcosm of the universe, reflecting those larger patterns and laws in our own unique ways.
Exactly. And this understanding of interconnectedness was central to Gurdjieff's teachings.
Mm.
He believed that true self-transformation wasn't just about individual growth,
Okay.
but about aligning ourselves with these universal laws, becoming
Yeah.
more conscious participants in this like cosmic dance.
That's a beautiful way to put it, but it also seems like kind of a daunting task, you know?
Yeah.
How do we even begin to grasp these universal laws, let alone align ourselves with them? It really does feel like a pretty grand endeavor, like trying to align ourselves with these universal laws.
So it is. It totally is. And
Yeah.
Gurdjieff was very clear that it's not something we can just like do on our own.
Okay.
He really emphasized the importance of group work for this kind of self-transformation.
Group work. So like, are we talking like therapy groups or is this something different?
It's definitely a different flavor of group work. So Gurdjieff, he believed that being in a group of like-minded people, people who are all committed to this path of conscious evolution, right?
Okay.
He said that that could actually provide the support, the accountability, and those mirrors that we need to really see ourselves more clearly.
So it's like creating that kind of supportive environment where we can challenge each other to grow and to break free from those individual patterns that we all get stuck in.
100%, yeah.
Yeah.
It's that idea that, like, we're not isolated islands. We're all part of this larger tapestry. And Gurdjieff said this really great thing. He said, a man-woman can only evolve in conjunction with others.
That makes a lot of sense. It really does. It's very easy to fall back into those old habits when we're just kind of doing our own thing, you know? But like having that group to support us and challenge us, that can make a huge difference.
Yeah, totally. It's like having a team of fellow explorers
Mm-hmm.
all kind of navigating this uncharted territory of consciousness together.
I love that analogy. So if someone is listening to this and feeling inspired, like how can they actually find a Gurdjieff group or community to join?
That's a great question. Well, there are Gurdjieff groups and centers all over the world.
Okay.
Often they're led by individuals who have been trained in his methods.
Okay.
So a good place to start might be to just like do some online research, see what you can find,
Yeah.
or see if there are any like workshops or events happening in your area.
And are there any like red flags to watch out for? Any signs that a group might not be like the real deal?
Oh, that's such a good question because, yeah, Gurdjieff himself actually warned against like charlatans who might try to exploit his teachings for their own personal gain.
Right.
So it's always wise to just be discerning, Trust your intuition and look for groups that are really emphasizing authenticity, integrity, and a true, genuine commitment to that inner work.
That's such important advice. It really is. So as we kind of start to wrap up our deep dive here, is there any one book or source that you would recommend for listeners who want to like keep exploring Gurdjieff's teachings.
Yeah, absolutely. So Gurdjieff, he wrote a few different books, but I think probably his most well-known is called Beelzebub's Tales to His Grandson.
Okay, yeah.
And I'll be honest, it's a challenging read. Gurdjieff, he intentionally wrote it in this very dense, layered style.
I've heard it described as a book that you don't just read, you, like, wrestle with.
That's a perfect way to put it. It's not passive reading. It requires you to actively engage, to question, to reflect on what you're reading.
So it's in line with, like, Gurdjieff's emphasis on conscious effort. Even reading his words requires us to kind of wake up from that mental slumber we were talking about.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. And I think that's a really fitting note to end on.
Yeah.
If there's one key takeaway from our deep dive today, it's that we have that potential, that ability to wake up from that sleep state, to move beyond those mechanical reactions, and really start living with more awareness, more intention, more connection.
It's a journey. It's definitely not a destination. And it all starts with that very first step of simply paying attention. So to all of you listening, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the world of G.I. Gurdjieff. We hope you found it insightful, thought-provoking, maybe even a little inspiring. And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.